There's nothing working on this street. Nothing. No lights, no power, no radio. Nothing except one car. Yours.
How do you figure it started, Les?
Yeah, how do you explain that?
Yeah, what's the idea, Les?
Hello, and welcome to the Twilight Pone, the internet's third most popular Twilight Zone podcast. My name is John. I'm joined by my co-host, Fred.
Hello.
How you doing this week, Fred?
I'm good. I'm doing well. Did you have a good week off?
Yeah, thank you for that. There was just kind of the mix of events and circumstances, both light and shadow, and getting a cold, and having people in town, and blah, blah, blah.
Yes, it's quite mysterious and enigmatic and dramatic, the events that conspired to make us miss a week. I do want to give a shout out. I was actually at a wedding for the majority of last weekend, and it was the wedding of a great friend of the podcast, a guy named Eric, and he got married last weekend, and it was kind of amazing.
Is that going to be our next giveaway? We will come to your wedding and or bar mitzvah.
I tried to give a speech.
I gave a Serling-style speech. People loved it.
I offered to replace the officiant, but a hearty congratulations to Eric, who's a great friend of the podcast, and he got married last weekend, and I went there. It was kind of like I went to his bachelor party a week before. This is PG-13, but I went to his bachelor party.
Twilight Pone after hours.
Right, exactly. And,
I'll get the censor bleep ready. Let's go.
Okay. He had just recovered from cancer, so maybe taking it down a bit. But he had just recovered from cancer, and we went bowling, and he bowled like a turkey, for the first time in his life, which is 3 strikes a row, and it was on the 10th frame. And it was just this, moments in life are rarely that positive. It was just I just beat cancer, and I bowled 3 strikes a row, and I'm getting married, and the American flag
gets, shot through the head somehow.
Yeah,
something bad. That much good can't happen to one person.
Yeah, well, I'll have to check in with him on his honeymoon, and hopefully the good times are rolling. Anyway, what are we talking about this week? We're on our 120th episode, so that must mean we're talking about an iconic episode.
Yeah, it's time to do a doozy. We will be discussing. That's what we like to call it, TM. This week we will be discussing The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, a first season episode, the 22nd of the production run. It aired originally on March 4th, 1960.
Maple Street, USA. Late summer. A tree-lined little world of front porch gliders, barbecues, the laughter of children, and the bell of an ice cream vendor. At the sound of the roar and the flash of light, it will be precisely 6:43 p.m. on Maple Street. This is Maple Street on a late Saturday afternoon. Maple Street, in the last calm and reflective moment before the monsters came.
Where are we again, John?
It's got kind of a Willoughby vibe, this Maple Street, doesn't it?
Just a bit, yeah. It got kind of esoteric there. What's a front porch gliders? What's a front porch glider?
I think that's just a swing on the front porch.
Okay, got it. So we like to write our own Serling-style intros. John was just making some last-minute edits to his before we started recording. Does that mean you're?
Well, I have my team working on my jokes all throughout the show. People don't know how live podcasting is done. We've got the writers in the corner; they're constantly rewriting bits depending on what happens, who might show up. If Seth Rogen has a big gaffe, we want to be able to make a joke on that.
Right. There's the guy up in the booth just pointing to a bunch of monitors, sort of nonsensically. Mine isn't very good, but I feel like I always use that as an excuse to pass it off to you. This time I'm just going to pass it off to you.
Okay. So that means I'm going first?
Yeah, sorry. I meant I used it as an excuse to go first and get out of the way, but done it too much. Go ahead.
Street scene. Summer. Grass on the lawn. Mowers on the grass. God in heaven, and everything is just right. Except for one small thing. Lurking in the shadows behind the picket fences and parquet floors is a monster. Not a hobgoblin, babadook, hoi polloi, or any other mysterious meanie. Rather, this monster masquerades in a more mild-mannered manner. Skin, hair, blood, butt, all the same as you or I, but something evil beats in his sinister heart. He is what is known in his sleazy circles as an OM, but you might have heard him referred to as a ham radio operator. The kind of freakish nerd who listens to people who live hundreds or even thousands of miles away talking about the silliest of subjects, say about their favorite breakfast cereal, sports car, or TV show. such as the Twilight Zone.
Nice. Is hoi polloi the name of a monster?
No, it was a joke.
Oh,
Fred.
okay.
Keep
Got
up with
it.
me, Fred. Come on. Come on. I'm going fast. We're popping on all cylinders.
Sorry. It's been a week. Okay, cool. Here's mine. Maple Street. Manicured. Middle-class mannered men. Monsters? Meh. Meanwhile, malfunctioning machines. Miscreants. Mad males. Monsters? Maybe. Manic men. Malcontent mobs. Madcap macho misdeeds. Mayhem. Maladroit Martians. Monsters? Twilight Mo. Sorry.
That was pretty good.
M. The letter M, John.
We got to send that to the Sesame Street people.
Yeah.
We could get something. That was good.
All right. Give me a break.
I liked it.
All right, okay. Well, this is a first season episode of The Twilight Zone, meaning it's available in a million different ways for you to check out before we spoil it. Netflix, Hulu, probably YouTube, and of course by the DVDs and Blu-rays, but we're about to spoil the episode, so check it out before we get going. Probably, obviously, we open up on Maple Street. It was said like 50 times in Serling's intro. But it's like about as purely American as you can get. Like, the opening shots are like everyone on the suburban street having like an America off. You know what I mean? You know, it's like a guy fixing a scooter and a barbecue, and everybody's just having a good summery American time.
It would be a really good antidote for like the Willoughby people of the world who are just tired of this hectic pace. Just give them a walk down Maple Street and you'll see, you know, it's not so bad around
yeah, exactly.
now in the past.
Is that what your street is like in Pittsburgh, or?
Oh yeah, there's just, you know, like hot dog vendors and little kids with the wheels on sticks that they're trying to keep up. It's very
they're all wearing Steelers jerseys. And
basically, yeah.
Got it. Yeah. This is a bit of a side note, but the only time I've ever been to Pittsburgh is for your wedding, and like, you know, you hear it's like a Steelers town, but you don't expect like, you
don't expect the priest to be wearing a jersey, but then there it is.
Really, like you go to 7-Eleven and like this, you know, the slushy is like yellow and black, like it's oppressively like a dictatorship was my vibe. Anyway, back to Maple Street. The Twilight Zone stuff happens pretty quickly in this episode. Even sort of in the midst of Serling's intro, everybody looks up from their Americaning, and sort of an unseen object passes overhead, and it casts sort of like it's like a very brief rave flies overhead, and the strobe light flies on everybody, and they kind of look up, and a science fiction sound passes by. And, Serling then comes back and informs us that, the monsters are soon to arrive on this bucolic little suburban street. So right away, everybody starts having problems with their gym cracks. The power seems to go off. People's, electric drills go out. The phone lines cut out.
Yeah, it has the feel of, the beginning of an infomercial to it. Everyone's products just aren't working right. You know, they need the aliens to come in and solve it all.
Yeah, somehow a ShamWow is going to fix all of this. But very quickly, there's, an emergency council meeting of the elders of Maple Street. Everybody sort of runs out, and there's a very quick, all the white dudes in khakis kind of huddle up.
Yeah, the stout dads of Maple Street.
Yeah, exactly. Because they all know the game's coming on later. One of said stout dads is Julius Moomer, the guy from the bar.
Yeah.
Did you notice that right away?
You know, I mean, I've seen this episode a while back, pre-Moomer, and so I probably didn't think of it in that context. Now I'm seeing it in a Moomer lens, and it just doesn't help this character at all. But it definitely made it clear. It's unlikable.
Yes.
Got it.
It's kind of funny, too, because everyone is wearing very, late 50s, early 60s white guy attire, and he's wearing a shirt.
Right.
To say it's loud, it's deafening. It's like a Hawaiian shirt, but instead of Hawaiian tableaus, it's science fiction tableau. Did you do any freeze framing on it?
In my head, it's just Hawaiian, but I didn't look close.
It's weirder than that, man.
It's hard to look, right at the sun.
Exactly. It's one of those weird 3D eye puzzles. If you look at it a long time. But yeah, I guess he's kind of the lovable, pudgy racist on the block or whatever. I don't know. He's not racist, but Anyway,
just a blowhard.
He's a blowhard.
I think I caught Moomer in a line flub here. You want to listen closely?
Many line flubs, but yeah, let's hear it.
Why don't we go downtown and check with the police? They'll probably think we're crazy or something. A little power failure and everybody gets flustered and everything.
Yeah, and everybody...
Keep rolling. I got it.
Yeah. He does that a few times. I kind of get the feeling that he showed up on set kind of, I don't know, sweating and just wiping his brow with pages of the script. And they're all meeting up and talking about, this light that went overhead and the fact that all of their magic bullet blenders aren't working anymore. And one dude is going to go downtown to check in with the city about it, but he tries to get his car started, and that won't start. So it's not just the power to the houses, but it's everything. Kind of in the middle of this, one of the guys, Pete Van Horn, volunteers to walk over to the next block to sort of see what's going on down there. It's kind of funny the way they talk about it. It's very much like the next block is like 5 miles away. Did you get that a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, it did seem like he was going on a little trek. There was also kind of an oddly noticeable insert shot of his pant leg and the hammer from it, which it's not subtly handled because there's no other insert shots. Yes. So it's so glaring, like, I guess I need to remember there's a hammer there.
Yeah, I know. It's very much like, is he going to kill somebody with the hammer? It feels very much like a Chekhov's hammer moment.
Yes.
But meanwhile, the main dads of the block have abandoned the driving downtown plan, and they're going to go walk downtown on foot and sort of see what's up. But at this point, a little child, or kind of like a teenager, stops them as they're about to leave and says that they shouldn't go.
Yes, I've got this little fella, Tommy, has some theories on what might be up.
They don't want us to leave. That's why they shut everything off.
What makes you say that? Where'd you get that idea?
Isn't that the craziest thing you've ever heard? It's always that way in every story I've ever read about a ship landing from outer space.
From outer space yet? Sal, you better take him upstairs, put him to bed. He's been reading too many comic books or seeing too many movies or something.
Did Tommy have kind of like a Mr. B natural vibe to you?
Yeah. You mean Buzz and Mr.
No, I mean like...
You mean Mr. B.
I mean like Mary Martin playing Peter Pan type of vibe. Like he's got kind of like a weird voice. It sounds like...
It's a high-pitched voice, yeah.
It's high-pitched, but it's like, I don't know. He just has a very strange voice. I was sort of almost hypnotized by it when I watched the episode.
Well, maybe that's how he was able to sway people to his side so quickly. I mean, people really buy into the Tommy... agenda very quickly.
You know, initially people do kind of laugh off this whole sort of Tommy like comic book theory, but it does kind of plant a seed which grows mighty quickly, because in the next scene, you know, earlier there was this problem of the cars won't even start, but one of the dudes' cars just sort of starts up right away, kind of inexplicably, when he's not even standing next to it, and that's kind of the spark that ignites, you know, the beginning of this flame. The Maple Streeters go over to the guy who's got the working car to question him, and it very quickly sort of takes on the feel of a mob, you know?
I think, well, Tommy has a little bit more gas to throw on the fire before they get there. I think maybe this will help a little bit.
Go ahead, Tommy. What kind of a story was it? What about the people they sent ahead?
That was the way they prepared things for the landing. They sent 4 people, a mother and a father and 2 kids who looked just like humans. But they weren't.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So you can see he's convincing here.
Tommy Joseph McCarthy. The episode really lives or dies by your belief that people will sort of accept this theory that he throws forth about aliens. Right. And obviously it's ridiculous. And I think that they do a good job having the adults kind of initially shoot it down. But they don't do a great job of selling the turn. Yeah, exactly. Because like the first thing that happens, the guy's car starting up inexplicably, people are like, "Whoa, maybe that's an alien motor in there." Like, you know, I don't know. There's a lot of suspicion right away of this guy Les Goodman. And when the sort of Maple Street mob goes over to the Maple Street mob goes over to talk to him, they're very suspicious of him right away. It comes out that apparently he's even more suspicious because sometimes late at night he goes out and stands on his lawn and, you know, looks up at the sky, presumably looking up at his alien homeworld in kind of a nice nostalgic moment. I just feel like they're a little too suspicious of him too quickly, you know?
Yeah, and Les isn't having that. He starts pushing back.
You scared, frightened rabbits, you. You're sick people, do you know that? You're sick people, all of you. And you don't even know what you're starting here, because let me tell you, you're starting something here that's what you should be frightened of. As God is my witness, you're letting something begin here that's a nightmare.
I mean, I like the speech, but like, should it really be to like To Kill a Mockingbird level drama, like in the first 5 minutes of the episode? You know?
Yeah, the speech could have worked. It's just we haven't gotten to that turn.
Yeah,
Exactly. And the fact that it's all just because his car kind of started, but it's kind of seems like it's not really in his control.
Yeah,
you can tell. I mean, I did think this kind of played like a Halloween episode of Car Talk, though.
Just a bit, yeah. Oh, so you got a 57 Chevy that starts up and people suspect you of being an alien.
What my brother likes to do here in these situations.
You want to go to the shotgun early.
I did debate doing my intro and clicking clack speak, and I vetoed that pretty quick, so I just couldn't do the accent.
That wasn't a terrible... I'm not sure if that was click or clack, but it was pretty good. I liked it.
Yeah, I did think, on the list of objectionable things you can do in your own yard, looking at the sky, pretty low.
Yes,
pretty
exactly.
low.
Yeah.
I don't have my own yard now, but once I get one, I got plans. Big plans.
Big plans. I'm going to,
Oh, and if I could just sidebar before we get too far afield. I don't know if you would notice this. We'll probably just have to throw it on the Tumblr. I don't think this woman ever has a line of dialogue, but when they're all kind of huddled around the car and it's not working right before they go and start harassing Les, there's a woman in the crowd. She's wearing a vertical striped shirt. Hot or not, Kristen Wiig. let me just email it over to you.
Okay.
You can,
this is definitely worth a break.
We want to know right now. Sent.
Okay. Oh wow, yeah. She really does look like Kristen Wiig.
Oh,
she looks almost like a haunted Kristen Wiig.
I know. This is like as dramatic as Kristen Wiig's ever played.
Yes, exactly. This is like one of those... Are you familiar with the internet meme where people like find like a weird like old Daguerreau type and it looks like Rob Corddry or something like that?
Oh,
are
no.
you familiar
Okay.
with that?
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Walter Jameson of internet memes. This is very much like maybe that's Kristen Wiig time traveled. Anyway, good hot or not.
I'm sure the audience is loving this.
It works real well on radio. We'll put it on the Tumblr. Anyway, when we get back from commercial, it's night, and everybody's out in the street with lanterns and candles. It was kind of at this point that it just seemed odd to me that, like, no one has left the street to go to another block because, like, or come back, It's like even on a non-weird day, people would leave like, it's not like... everybody spends every day of their lives on one block,
Well, I mean, it was a simpler time on Maple Street
but...
where people weren't allowed to leave their sector.
Right, exactly. But it's
Except
like the way they talk about like going over to check out what's going on around the corner. It's like you need to travel by horseback to get there. It's weird.
Not everyone's as cosmopolitan as you, Fred. Sure. Sometimes you just hunker down on your block, and unless you have to go to work or church, you don't leave ever.
Put on your horse blinders and drink your lemonade. Anyway, we hear a conversation between Julius Moomer, sort of the kind of like loudmouth Hawaiian shirt-wearing Maple Streeter, and his wife. And they're watching Les Goodman's house, the suggested monster. Kind of random sidebar that's probably not appropriate. Did you feel like Julius was punching above his weight a little with his wife?
I think that's just a trope that continues throughout, even to today.
Yeah.
Of the kind of, buffoonish, portly man with the attractive wife.
Yeah. No, true. Or maybe he was like a stud when he was younger and he kind of let himself go.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably mainly muscle there.
True.
He's the kind of guy, if he were just to hit the gym 15, 20 minutes 2 times a week, he'd be Studville.
He'd be a fridge.
Easy.
Everybody's watching Les Goodman. Beers are being drunk. Vibes are getting hotter. And there's a lot of kind of like Salem witch trial style accusations tossed out. Mm-hmm. At some point, it's not just Les that's under suspicion. It's this guy, Steve, who's kind
kind of our protagonist.
Yes, he's kind of like the good guy in as much as there is a good guy.
Right. I'd say he kind of looks like, maybe not Andy Griffith, but like a guy who ate Andy Griffith. He's a little bigger, yes. A little bit more meaty. I mean, similar.
Maybe not all of Andy Griffith. He's not quite that meaty. He ate Andy Griffith's head, maybe.
He's like, 1 1/3 to 1.5 Griffith.
Yes, exactly. It's a good measurement of man.
Yeah. If we wanted to measure, what's the proper measurement of 1/50s man? It'd be the 1 Griffith. So he's coming in at 1.5 Griffiths.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't understand what you're talking about in England. They've got the Peter O'Toole over there. Right. Apparently, Steve's big crime is that he's been working on something in his basement, a radio, and apparently no one has seen this radio that he's built in his basement.
Who talks to you on that radio set, and who do you talk to?
Well, I'm surprised at you, Charlie. How come you're so dense all of a sudden? Who do I talk to? Well, I talk to monsters from outer space. I talk to 3-headed green men who fly over here in what look like meteors.
Steve, please. It's just a ham radio set, that's all. I bought the book for him myself. It's just a ham radio set. A lot of people have them.
Sure. That's what he told her when he bought it. A lot of people have ham radios.
How many ham radio podcasts ironically start with like, it's just a ham radio, Steve. Just a ham radio.
Oh, God. I love the thought of like him contacting aliens even though it is only a ham radio and the aliens are just like ham radio operators. 10-4, good buddy.
Yeah, I do think there's probably some portion of the audience who like wasn't quelled when it was like, it's a ham radio. Yeah.
Well, we're not suspecting you of being a Martian, but you're probably pretty weird. There's something wrong with you.
I did his read was infinitely better, but just hearing it isolated, his lines kind of reminded me of the lines in Black Leather Jackets.
Yes,
they were
totally,
like, people, we are little green monsters. Check it, Daddy-O. We're from outer space.
Yeah, it is very... There's that little beat in the episode Black Leather Jackets where the real aliens claim to just be ham radio operators, or there's some mention of them operating a ham radio. I don't exactly remember what it was, and I was wondering, is this just like the craze of the late 50s, Like,
I just think it shows that the Zone is like a fully thought-out universe.
No,
this all connects perfectly.
The Zoneverse. Yes. Who is Steve, by the way? He's been in another episode. I'm confident.
Yeah, he was the sensible guy in The Little People.
Yes.
He was the one who's like, what motivates you?
Yeah. What's your motivation, Julius Moomer? Right. He plays a very good like dude who's urging other people to be reasonable.
He's a good heavy.
Well,
well, not heavy, but like a
moral heavy.
Yeah, like a good moral compass. Like so Steve is kit bashing radios in his basement.
Right.
Everyone's nervous.
Yes. Steve is sticking up for human decency and for his right to ham radio privacy. And he makes kind of a nice little Serling-style speech about how, he's got the right to talk to weirdos far away.
It's part of the Second Amendment.
Yes, exactly.
Guns and ham radios. Exactly. Read it close, folks.
And people seem sort of like momentarily chastised by that speech. But at that point, a shadowy figure appears at the end of the block, sort of a creepy-looking guy, cloaked in darkness, approaching slowly.
Yeah, always the right way to go when you know your neighbors are... Oh, wait, I'm spoiling. Never mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're 1 second away from the spoiler. And the spoiler...
Every second counts, Fred.
Fair. Let's fix it in the edit. We, actually, it's sort of spoiled for us because as he's walking, we cut to the insert shot, and we see that is... it's the hammer dude, the guy who went over to check out...
Well, wait, I forget. Do we cut before or after he gets shot?
Before.
Oh, they do?
You just spoiled that, too.
Sean. Damn it.
A week off and you're just blowing it. It's the hammer. It's the dude who went over to check out how things were going over 50 miles away on the 400 block of Maple Street. He returns, but he's cloaked in darkness and people are kind of like going, oh my God, it's the monster. Get him. And I forget where the shotgun came from, but a shotgun appears at this point. And Julius Moomer, the portly gentleman in the Hawaiian shirt, grabs the shotgun and fires it at the approaching stranger. And very quickly we learn it is in fact not a monster, but a dude with the hammer, Keith Van Horn. So that's shocking, but you know what's more shocking than a guy getting shot? Someone's lights going on. Because the people forget...
Classic escalation.
Yes, exactly. The people forget the death pretty quickly when Julius Moomer's house lights up in the middle of the darkness. And so suddenly suspicion is adjusted from the ham radio dude to the Hawaiian shirt dude.
Well, I mean, it helps that he did just murder one of their neighbors. And
I
now
know,
his light's
John,
going
but
off.
the light was really the thing that kicked off the mob. If you remember, they're kind of like, oh no, but then the light goes off, and that's when that really gets them going.
It's building to a frenzy.
Yes, it is. And the frenzy begins with people grabbing rocks and going all Shirley Jackson and throwing rocks at Charlie, the Hawaiian shirt dude. And on the porch of his lit up house, he pleads with everybody to stop, and then he throws kind of like a hot potato. Like he throws suspicion on the kid, who did do an internship with a monster. But the kid, under suspicion, starts running away, and people start running after him. And random lights start going on and off, and everybody starts yelling, and the canted angles start happening, and it's this sort of like crazy montage of utter...
Starts feeling like one of my HOA meetings, really. Like, this is just... When you get a neighborhood association together...
Yes. Yeah, it's either like a parking resolution or violence. Mob violence. It is kind of funny, though, because the montage is all things that are happening up close, and like some of it feels like a montage of like gangland violence. Like, you kind of expect a newspaper to come flying out at you. There's this crazy mob taking off, and then we start... peeling away to an overhead shot that's kind of cool. It's like slowly pulling back, and you see all these people running around. Kind of sidebar on that. Did you look closely at the sort of the chaos from happening from far away?
No.
There's a distinct feeling of like sauntering chaos. Like the action is very fast and furious when you're up close, but when they cut to the overhead shot, there's a few people who kind of like aren't given 100% to the mob violence.
It's a summer afternoon, evening, you know.
True.
You don't want to get the vapors, Fred.
True, very true. But we keep pulling back, we pull back, and eventually we get to sort of a hillside overlooking this little suburban community. We see a couple of dudes, Martians or aliens, and they're pretty smug about the whole thing they just pulled.
Just stop a few of their machines and radios and telephones and lawnmowers. Throw them into darkness for a few hours and then sit back and watch the pattern.
And this pattern is always the same?
With few variations. They pick the most dangerous enemy they can find, and it's themselves. All we need to do is sit back and watch.
Then I take it this place, this Maple Street, is not unique.
By no means. Their world is full of Maple Streets. And we'll go from one to the other and let them destroy themselves. One to the other. One to the other. One to the other.
Yeah, I got it, Carl. One to the other. You don't have to say it.
It'd be funny if he was just being very literal and they just go to every city's Maple Street.
Yes, exactly. We've done it.
No, there are Maple Streets all over this city, this country.
Yeah, there's 18 of them. It is a remarkably inefficient plan for taking over the world to do it street by street. But
yeah, I mean, maybe this is like the test case to like, you know, you ease the trainee into it. Let him get a couple streets under his belt. Then you work him up to like a medium-sized town.
Yeah, then you get to Broadway.
Yeah, we want to make sure this plays in Philadelphia first. Exactly.
Yeah, they're trying it out in Peoria. It's like market research. Anyway, what does Serling have to say?
The tools of conquest do not necessarily come with bombs and explosions and fallout. There are weapons that are simply thoughts, attitudes, prejudices, to be found only in the minds of men. For the record, prejudices can kill, and suspicion can destroy. And a thoughtless, frightened search for a scapegoat has a fallout all of its own. For the children, and the children yet unborn. And the pity of it is that these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone.
I kind of like that last line. I thought it was kind of cool, you know? Like, so often Serling is talking about, like, it's the soda fountain to be found in the Twilight Zone. And it's kind of nice that he sort of makes the point. I mean, obviously this is like a episode that has sort of a political tilt to it. And it's nice that he sort of acknowledges that in kind of like a sort of wry way at the very end.
It has the feeling that he took a little extra effort with this one.
Yeah, I know.
Like, he knew he had a good episode under his belt right now.
Yeah. Like, cut to him recording, and he's just kind of like got his heels up on the desk and sort of leaning back like, yep, God don't make no trash. Yeah, so that's the episode. I do think it's funny. I never thought about this until I watched it to do the podcast. I mean, I've seen this episode before a couple times, but it's funny because the title of the episode, "The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street," the twist of it is obviously that it's the people themselves. But there are Martians. Like, they're kind of the monsters here.
Yeah, it is odd because it's like, first they make you think they're aliens, and then Serling's kind of suggesting it's all people's fault. But yeah, the aliens
do kind of get it going.
They got a role to play.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting. Yeah, they're like thinking like they're aliens, and obviously they're wrong to suspect that they're aliens among them, but there are aliens. So maybe they're just like not being that efficient in their witch hunt. That's clearly the message.
Yeah,
if you're going to have a witch hunt, just make sure you cast a wider net. To say it's even a metaphor is maybe a stretch, but it's about this phenomenon of, I guess, mob mentality is the simplest way to put it, but just what happens when there's a large amount of suspicion and fear in a group of people, and it starts turning in on itself, and it becomes very chaotic and virulent very quickly because there's no way to sort of diffuse it. And I do think it's like a good illustration of it. Once you have this tone of suspicion and fear, it's very hard to break it down because anyone who steps forward to try and stop it looks guilty. And it's this weird, like, human thing that just can happen. And, obviously, like, McCarthyism is a good example that was sort of relatively contemporary with this episode. But, it's happened many, many times, in small instances and large instances, obviously the Salem witch trials. And so I think it's a cool episode that could have an obvious political message given the events of the day, but it applies more broadly to human nature, too.
Right. I mean, McCarthy would have been fresh in people's mind, but luckily, sometimes when you try and do a rip from the headlines, it can age very poorly, but this one is broad enough that it can be applicable.
Well, I think that's like the difference between something like this and He's Alive, because I think when they did He's Alive, it's like, the American Nazi Party had just been founded, and obviously that seemed insane. And of course it is insane, but it's like, I feel like the danger that like Serling warned of in that episode is like people dressing like as Nazis and holding up pictures of Hitler and talking about like, let's get Nazism started up again. And I think that like the danger is more insidious than people just using Nazi iconography. Like it'll take a new form. And I think that this episode kind of takes the same idea of warning against something, but it makes it broad enough and metaphorical enough that it doesn't have to have some relationship with events of the day. It can apply at any time, more or less.
Right, and it doesn't come off quite as trite or hackneyed.
As like pat or like obvious.
Right, right. Yeah. We talked about it. I do think the one problem with this episode is just the turn to get the neighborhood on board with there might actually be aliens here. Yeah. Actually was watching this episode and kind of, since I had so much problems with that turn, I was kind of not enjoying it as much or kind of finding it silly. I didn't really get back into it until the part where he shot the neighbor. As soon as that happens, it just like, I'm sure there's only a couple minutes left, but it kind of goes from silly to like, OMG, serious.
Get
to
real.
To just like insane very quickly. And I mean, I think it's trying to show how things can spiral out of control pretty quickly.
Yeah. That is the big knock on the episode, is that the build to chaos is handled. It's a little herky-jerky, It's funny because in my memory of the episode, it's like the power goes off, then the car goes on, and then lights turn on and off, and various people are cast into suspicion. But really, it's only the car is the only thing that really happens before the guy gets shot. And I kind of feel like, in a weird way, it should have been like the guy getting shot should have been at the beginning of should have been the final point before chaos happens,
Well, I think it kind of is.
Well, yeah, but
you say like, oh, Moomer's car, but I think really they were like on a hair's breadth of turning on him, and then the aliens just kind of,
his light. But yeah, how exactly to fix it is maybe like up for debate. But I do think that is kind of the weird knock on the episode, is that like it goes from like, oh, silly Tommy with your comic books, to like, who's the alien, like real quick. And I think that like it requires a little bit of like suspension of disbelief to believe that people wouldn't just leave the block to find out what's happening next door, and like, I don't know, get on a bicycle maybe,
I don't know, maybe if they'd like put a storm in there or something that like, made it hard for people to get out.
I do think that like it's a very conscious choice to set it on like a very classic like American iconographic I'm not sure if that's a word, but in a very classic sort of American suburban setting. But it might have worked better if this was like a very small town in the middle of nowhere, as opposed to like one street.
Right.
It's one of the cool things about the Twilight Zone that I really like. It's a show that was made sort of in this golden era of television, like the same time that all these like classic sort of Leave It to Beaver type sitcoms are getting made about the suburbs and like the nuclear family and like classic 50s iconography. But it weirdly subverts them. It like takes the same sets and the same actors and the same ideas and just like throws an element of unease into them. And oftentimes that's kind of, I don't want to say inconsequential, but like they're just telling a spooky story and that's the materials that they have that are available to them. But like this is a very conscious effort of like, we're going to take this Leave It to Beaver world and we're going to, throw it into chaos. And maybe it's a bit on the nose, but I think it works really well and it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, think of Julius Moomer's character in like a normal 50s, 60s show. He's just like the goofy, annoying neighbor. Yeah. And in this episode, the goofy, annoying neighbor has just like shot another one of the neighbors because he was scared. I mean, that's pretty disturbing for what people would have been used to.
Well, it's like, it's a good life. It's a good life. Is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. I always forget that. You have this character who's like an adorable kid, and in a normal 50s sitcom, he would be Beaver, but he'd be
mischievous, but he's actually like killing people, mischievous.
Exactly. And I think those are my favorite kinds of episodes of the Twilight Zone. Is taking like the cliches and the iconography of 50s television and twisting it, making it weird and creepy. Mm-hmm. And I think that like this episode's a great example of that.
Yeah.
And it's hilarious. Hit the jingle, John.
What we doing next?
Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Bios and trivia. Yeah. Scott, Zickery, Mark Grams Jr., Zickery and Grams and IMDb.
According to IMDb.
Yes.
The street sight in the beginning is all wrong. It faces the camera rather than the street where the story takes place. In a typical American city, street signs are almost always placed in the direction of the street that they are indicating, so traffic on the other street in the intersection know what they are turning into or passing. In other words, the story is not set on Maple Street. Maple Street is the intersecting street at the end of the road the story is set on.
Worst episode ever.
Yeah, so that's going to knock this one down at least 2 or 3 points in my rating.
For sure.
Samples from the episode were used extensively by the Canadian industrial music band Skinny Puppy for their song Monster Radio Man.
Cool.
Little fun fact, a man I used to work with toured with Skinny Puppy a little bit back in the 80s.
Nice.
So.
What band was that?
Mark of Cain.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, the location used for Maple Street was later reused as the abandoned town in Stopover in a Quiet Town. I think it was reused a ton of times. But
it's just like that, America Town, USA.
Yeah. And then the uniforms worn by the aliens, the spaceship ramp, the shot of the flying spaceship, etc., 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 were all from Forbidden Planet. Finally, a 2003 remake of the episode was created in the 2000s Twilight Zone, renamed The Monsters Are on Maple Street.
Oh.
And apparently that one dealt with the fears of terrorism.
Ooh,
so we might have yes. I'm sure it was handled tastefully.
Yes.
Added a lot to the discussion.
Yes, 100% sure. Martin Grams has got a lot on this. It's funny, like the. I have this trivia book.
You had to buy the supplemental exactly. Maple Street.
Yes, I have a trivia book called The Twilight Zone: Unlocking the Door to a Television Classic by Martin Grams Jr. And it's a great book. It's got a crap ton, and emphasis on ton of trivia, and like the trivia section of each episode is usually pretty long, but this one starts with The year was 1951. I don't know. Call me Ishmael. But apparently, like, this episode lifts some basic ideas from a radio script that Rod Serling wrote in 1951 called The Button Pushers, sort of about like a nuclear disaster involving two aliens kind of looking down, wryly at Earth and saying, sort of sardonic things, kind of much the same way the Martians do at the end of this episode. Or I don't know if they're Martians, but aliens. There's some discussion about how this is one of the episodes that really did touch on political topics, although I don't think he got as many angry letters about this one as he did about other ones. I think sort of it's broad enough to not feel like it refers to any specific thing. One thing I did love, this is one of my favorite details from Graham's, is that on March 5th, 1960, Earl Kemp of the Chicago Science Fiction League wrote to Serling as an unashamed fan letter. In the letter, Kemp regarded the Twilight Zone as he praises the show, and then he goes on to say, "Of course, I do have complaints too." Now, this is 1960. "Of course, I do have complaints too. I'm pretty damn tired of seeing MGM's overworked Forbidden Planet saucer and the same astronomical." So even then, people were picking up on
pretty
that.
awesome when it's like pre-VHS, pre-DVD.
Yes.
You guys probably only seen, I don't know how often you'd be able to see Forbidden Planet.
Yes, exactly. I feel like that guy was like the Martin Grahams of his day.
Right.
And then there's a lot of sort of interesting details about how this was one of the most frequently requested. People would like sometimes write Serling or CBS and ask for a copy of the film to show in TV or in church or, for various educational purposes. This one was very frequently requested, and it's actually still taught in high schools today. I remember one of my high school teachers showing it to us. And also he wrote a short story version of it that was in a couple textbooks. So this is maybe, I don't know, an episode that kind of lives on in the hallowed halls of American education. So that's cool.
All right. Claude Akins played Steve Brand, as we've said, registered in at 1.5 Griffiths.
Yes.
He was also in The Little People. Barry Atwater played Les Goodman.
Yeah, who is that?
He was also in a few Night Gallery episodes.
Okay.
Oh, who was Les Goodman? He was the guy whose car wasn't working.
No, but I
The
mean,
first-
is he a famous actor or something like that?
I think his name just looks a lot like Barry Goldwater. Or Lee Atwater.
It's a name that sounds like a famous guy, but I'm not sure if it actually is.
Jack Weston played Charlie Farnsworth. He was also in The Bard. He's the Moomer. Amzie Strickland played Woman. She was also in the 1980s Twilight Zone. Maybe, I'm guessing, playing Woman again. I don't remember. Burt Metcalf played Don Martin. He was a longtime producer on MASH. I think the entire series run. Mary Gregory played Sally. She was also in The Shelter in The Lateness of the Hour. Jason Johnson played Man. He was also in The Lateness of the Hour. And Barton played Myra. She was also in Shadow Play. So a lot of repeat customers here. Then Jan Hanslick played Tommy. One thing that's kind of interesting, he's currently a high-power, white-collar criminal defense attorney. I think based out of L.A. So that was kind of
pioneered the usage
for a while
of the Martian defense.
Yeah, for a while he worked at a law firm that, like a very prestigious firm that I've got a friend who works at the same place, and I thought that was kind of neat. But apparently he's since gone out on his own. So
could have gotten an interview there.
Yeah, I know.
Imagine if it had been JoJo.
Dare to dream, Fred. Written by Serling, directed by Ron Winston. He also directed Stopover in a Quiet Town and Big Tall Wish. And unfortunately, we normally like to try and find connections between Mystery Science Theater 3000 and the episodes we're talking about. I couldn't find any new ones this
It's kind of
week,
funny.
so.
I kept thinking somehow that Julius Moomer was played by Jackie Coogan, who's in The Space Children. There's a kind of like a budget Coogan to him, but sadly it's not. What about IMDb ratings? What do they give this one?
IMDb gives this one a 9.0, putting it very high.
Yeah, definitely among the top 5 to 10. And, if you look at the average list of the top 5 or 10 Twilight Zone episodes, this one is usually to be found.
Yes.
I think it's very, very good. It's a Twilight Zone episode that makes a message in a clear way, and it's, maybe a little bit heavy-handed, but, there's an urgency to it, and it makes its point in a valid way. And I think that it's kind of quintessentially Twilight Zone-y. It's got all the elements. The only thing that really holds it back for me is that the thing that we discussed earlier is that the build is a little clunky. So it's I don't know. It's not a 10, but I'm kind of going between 8 and 9. How about you?
I generally agree. I think it's very well directed, well acted, all very well put together. You're right. It's quintessential Twilight Zone in the sense of its street scene, summer,
Yeah.
Americana, blah, blah, blah. And then this ominous, scary thing creeps in, and there's a good twist to it all. Like we've discussed ad nauseum at this point, the only thing that holds it back for me is just getting all the people on board for the space alien potential that really drives the paranoia through the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
And watching the episode, I was kind of getting into like, oh, why do I remember this as being that great? This is good, but maybe it's more like 7-ish. And then once he shot the guy, I was like, oh yeah. And then as soon as they're running around screaming, like smashing all the other windows, and it happens so quick, it's like, yeah, this is why this episode's really impressive. Like,
yeah.
I just feel like it does a good job of illustrating in a, it's not perfect, but it's a really, really good illustration of mobs taking control too quick and things getting way out of control really fast. And I don't know. It's not one of my favorites personally, or I don't know. It's not like my favorites, but it's really, really good. So I'm thinking like a 9.
Yeah. Like how you said, it's a problem with mobs taking control too quickly. You want to wait a while to get the mob to take control.
Yeah, you want to ease in that mob.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, that all makes good sense to me. It's like, it is a 9. It's for sure a 9. It's like a very, very good episode that has like kind of this one kind of smiggling little problem that's maybe holds it back from 10-age, but it's a great episode. So let's leave it there.
Cool.
That wraps it up for episode 120, The Monsters Who Do on Maple Street. I'm not sure if that actually was a request.
Yeah, no one wanted to hear us talk about this one, but we did it anyway.
Yeah, bad boys. Twilight Zone podcasting scene. Next week is 121. Do you have any desires?
We'll do a listener request, but we won't let them know quite yet. We'll tease them.
Okay, so we're going to do a request, and we'll let you know about it on Twitter and Tumblr, and we'll email you if you email us. And how can people do that, John?
People can send us an email at twilightpwn, pwn@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us on Twitter at twilightpwn. You can check out the website, twilightpwn.tumblr.com. You can, of course, listen to us on Stitcher or any kind of podcast catcher app, or you could subscribe to us on iTunes. If you're over there, if you'd leave us a review or a rating, we'd really appreciate it. We've been getting some ratings lately, but I don't have any new names to call out, so yeah. Anyways, thank you very much for folks who've been leaving ratings for us. We really appreciate those too.
Yeah, much appreciated. So I don't know. I don't have a great... Have you ever been part of an angry mob, John? I don't know.
Fred, did you notice how lame the aliens' Bluetooths were at the very end?
Yeah, I did. The aliens do have kind of, first generation Bluetooth, to be sure. Bluetooth technology in 1961 wasn't as advanced as it is now.
When I told you I wear a Bluetooth pretty often, you were probably picturing that. It's much more sleek, compact. It's a very cool look, Fred.
Yeah, I'm sure it is, John. All right, well, I'll talk to you next week.
All right, later, Fred.
Late.